Well, we can't forget the ongoing recovery efforts happening from the recent hurricanes this season without mentioning the economic challenges ahead. Helene, roaring into the mountainous areas of western North Carolina, historic cities like Asheville taking a major hit, and this right before the peak of the tourism season. Buncombe County brings in billions of dollars from visitors. Just last year, they brought in nearly $3 billion from 14 million visitors. That was a record for them. Now, Western North Carolina's economy could lose as much as $1.8 billion if tourism doesn't pick up this fall, which unfortunately it very likely won't. Meteorologist Steve Bender spoke to Fox Business contributor Scott Martin yesterday on Fox Weather Live, analyzing the numbers.
It goes to show you how stormy or how bad these storms can be, and just how prepared I guess we could kind of be, but really not be when it comes to these storms, because of the fact there's so much economic activity. There's a lot of population growth in some of these areas, Steve, especially on the coasts where we're seeing a lot of impact. I mean, I appreciate that you bring me on when we're talking about billions of dollars here, because you know, you mentioned a very interesting stat. You said the $1.8 billion. That's for this year, too. I mean, we're talking about just this year. Now, look next year, look at years after that. If there's a change in the landscape, I mean, Steve, you and I know Florida pretty well, and we're talking, Hurricane Ian. We've talked about Hurricane Milton. That has changed the coastline down there, my friend. So you're talking about changing the environment in which humans are living. So there is a almost immeasurable impact going forward, both in our hearts and our wallets, as to how bad this stuff is going to be.
Scott, the comparison, I guess, for North Carolina, over 800 landslides. So everybody that goes out to the mountains there and want to make those memories, or they live there because of that, the mountains have been giving away, and there's no telling when they can revitalize that. I want to ask you, though, because we think about tourism, we think about outside visitors coming in to get the influx of money. But I mean, when I was out there talking with people, this is their entire livelihood. This is their jobs that have effectively been wiped away. Asheville itself, the major city out there, they have about 29,000 jobs that revolve around being tourism workers. I mean, over 47,000 tourism workers in and of itself. And they are in tune with that. I mean, the North Carolina governor, that's Roy Cooper, he issued an emergency unemployment payment that are almost double what the state's typical unemployment payments are. That's $350 to $600. So when we look at that, they're trying to take care of the people there. But as you had alluded to, I mean, this is not just 1 year, not one season. This is going to be multiple seasons that are impacted. What does that do to the overall state? Not just Western North Carolina, but all of North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple good things and bad. I mean, one is, to your point, I mean, you're getting businesses washed away. I mean, you're getting lives completely forever changed that you cannot put a single dollar amount on, for sure. Yeah. Now, the good news about that, Steve, is some of the, let's say, funds or some of the activity, let's say economically, as we've seen in Florida, is fungible, meaning it will maybe go from Asheville to some other part in North Carolina, maybe Charlotte, maybe to the coast, whatever. Some of it. Now, what happens, in the future years and how they rebuild that stuff obviously will depend if some of it comes back. But my goodness, I appreciate some of the reach out from the government here, but they don't seem to know quite what the damage is yet. And Stephen, we're just looking at some of the numbers already. I mean, you're talking about historic damage here, both from Milton and Helene over the last few weeks, that is going to be just things we're going to be talking about for months and years to come. And I just hope that folks can at least get the funding and the help they need, so that when businesses do come back, the tourists will come back there. Because, I mean, you know as well as I do, I've been to Asheville a couple times, and it's gorgeous there. I love it. You talked about making memories in the mountains, Steve. My goodness, you touched my heart there. That's something that we will do again. It just may be a couple years.
Yeah, I've been 5 or 6 times. I found out while I was out there reporting, Scott, my mom and dad, they took their honeymoon to Asheville. They went to Biltmore Village. They climbed into the mountains. They did so much. There's so much beauty there, right? And you know what's so difficult about this? It's so historic, Scott, because when we look at this is not an area that's prepared for this type of flooding. I mean, when we look at Buncombe County, that's where Asheville resides, less than 1% of their businesses had flood insurance. So when we think about the trickle-down effect of that, we talk about, okay, let's get these businesses reopening again. But if you don't have that insurance, I mean, how difficult is that hurdle to climb when you don't have that insurance backing? That comes out of your wallet, yet you don't have people investing in you because you've lost everything. Like, when you think about that, the insurance itself, the lack of it, Scott, that seems to be a massive concern for so many.
Yeah, and imagine trying to get it now, Steve.
True.
So not only do you not have it, you probably have access to it going forward because either companies are not going to offer it or it's going to be ridiculously expensive, as a lot of friends and family of mine saw after Hurricane Ian. So that's the thing, too, is how does this get rebuilt? What kind of national assistance is given? What kind of state assistance is given? And do people, Steve, end up just going elsewhere? And the bad news, too, to your point about Asheville, is that Asheville's unique. I mean, there's
really
not
is.
another Asheville in the country, as far as I'm concerned. So there's some other places folks could go and maybe set up, and maybe that'll transpire. But this is a major, major loss. It's a major, major issue. And just from the standpoint of these folks there, I just hope that they can at least get some things back, to your point, so that if they do go somewhere else, they can at least ensure and get the right protection. But let's face it, Asheville has not had a storm like this in, gosh, I don't know, a few hundred years or maybe 100 years. So they've had nobody would have ever thought to get this kind of insurance, seeing this was going to happen.
There's no way to prep for this. I remember talking with the businesses there. They had it back in 2004, but it was 4 feet of flooding. You're talking about areas along the Swananoa River
20?
that rose 30 feet. We're getting those reports coming in. The number just keeps climbing. It's mind-boggling. I want to ask you, though, when I was out there, I noticed how much of the infrastructure itself was damaged. And so that's the beginning process, right? You can't build if you don't have any access points. We talk about I-40. I mean, that's the main artery through the mountains from eastern Tennessee into North Carolina. The DOTD, they were saying that's probably not going to open up until October 2025. Talk about supply and demand, how difficult it is for those truck drivers, those semi drivers that are always using that route. They're going to be rerouted, but also just getting the supplies in. I mean, just in general, when we look at this, how many businesses, the hurdles they have to overcome for this type of event, Scott, it's difficult to even think about when they come back. Because I'll tell you this, I talked with a general contractor who was in charge of Biltmore, trying to revitalize 15 of the businesses there. He said, I think I could get them back in a year, but that's even being optimistic. I mean, I don't even know if you could put a timetable on all this, right?
Some are gone, Steve, I think, unfortunately, because they need that economic activity ongoing. I mean, because they run maybe a little bit thin on margins, certainly in certain times of the year. So they need to get through these times by building up some of their cash flows, and they're not doing that. I mean, you mentioned the arteries. I mean, we've seen some of the pictures you guys have taken, which have been amazing. The coverage has been outstanding. I mean, train tracks are washed out, too. So you can't put stuff on trains. Airports, air travels, traffic's down there, of course. So there's not a lot of, let's say, supplements to cover this. And so you're right, stuff just doesn't go through there. Stuff will be rerouted. Maybe it stays rerouted. Who knows? And so those business activities are lost. And it just shows you how, I guess, somewhat fragile we all are. You know, we have this great economy. We talk, Steve, about all these great things that are happening in Illinois, Florida, Ohio, you know, wherever, North Carolina. But my goodness, man, as we talked about on set that one time, it's like we were looking at the hurricane season about a month ago or so, or 2 months ago, that was pretty quiet. And we're one storm away or two storms away from a total disaster and a wipeout situation. So just a very scary time.
It is. And right now, damage estimates are already in the several billions of dollars.